Hi, and welcome to the second episode of the Collective VC podcast. Today, we're joined by Reese Wong. We're super excited to have him on. He's doing so many things that I'll let him introduce himself, but I'm sure this will be a great episode. So, Reese, over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Reese. And yeah, I consider myself to be one of those people who have, I suppose, a bit of a portfolio career. I work on many different types of projects, but really at its core, it's really about community building. I love building communities. I love running communities. And I really like solving problems that community builders face. So that's a bit about me, but I think main highlights and projects I'm working on. The first one is definitely Micromeetup, early stage venture that I'm building that aims to reduce the barriers for connecting in real life. I run the Entrepreneur Society at LSE, where we're all about getting young people equipped with at least an entrepreneurial mindset. And last but not least, I'm also the incoming creator for the Global Shapers, which is a community for young people under 30 passionate about social impact, working on local-based projects here in London. So yeah, again, all about community and really trying to champion that through my work.
That's great. I think one thing we have in common is that we're both studying political science, right? And I'm a bit jealous because I'm also doing sort of an entrepreneur society here at Bristol. I'm not the president, but the guys, Dan and Theo, that are doing it. All of the great startup founders, investors doing cool stuff. Well, not all of them, but so many of them are in London, right? And then it's really hard to convince them to schlep out to Bristol. So I envy you in that one. But yeah, what's the LSE entrepreneurship scene like? And how did you get involved with that society?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. And I definitely, relate studying international relations / politics, right? It's quite unique. So whenever someone would guess what I study, it's always going to be like economics and management, like 99% of the time. So I think it's a pretty unique vantage point. But again, like IR is something I'm passionate about, but really what drives and motivates me is entrepreneurship, business, and community building. And so, yeah, in my first year, I was already really passionate about entrepreneurship. I had a different venture at that time, but the minute I landed in London, I suppose, I was really engaged in all the sort of ecosystem events and what was on offer. So participated in like pitch competitions, got to the final, and also supported the London Startup Fair, which is an initiative between uh, LSE, UCL, Imperial, and this year KCL. And so I ran that as the director, and basically, yeah, I got elected as president by this time last year. So it's been a really, really fruitful journey. Managed to get a lot of events on the calendar, and hopefully, yeah, moved a bit of the needle in terms of support available at LSE for entrepreneurs. But I think how would I characterize LSE? It's quite unique. I think actually I saw a report out of all the UK universities, we have the most percentage out of our alumni as so-called business founders. But one of the unique traits is that the average age of these folks when they start their business is approximately 5 to 6 years after they graduate. So people generally seem to want to get corporate experience before they venture into entrepreneurship, which makes a lot of sense. So I think there is an entrepreneurial culture here. People very much want to start a business. I think the question is mainly at what point of time in their life. So how we approach it, therefore, is for those that already have a venture idea, we're happy to support them for our in-house incubator, for our events with VCs, and all of that good stuff. But more importantly, we offer a broader range of events, including like corporate transformation journeys, bootstrapped entrepreneurs, to like basically everything, because we really want to champion this entrepreneurial mindset, meaning even if you don't want to start a business or a venture right this moment as an undergrad, as a master's student, you still have the skills that entrepreneurs have to even apply for a job, build your own personal brand, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really, my favorite book is Reid Hoffman's like Startup of You, which is about this idea of applying like lean design principles to your life, to career, job hunting, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a bit about like what we do. Yeah.
And it's interesting you say most people, they want to go for that corporate experience first, right? Because that's the image I have of LSE is people who it's very sort of knuckle down, go for those internships, especially I know finance very big over there. Everyone wants to get those sort of summer analyst roles. Is that still the case?
Yeah. It's hard to get like hard statistics on this, right? But I think the people who do want to go into corporate are very loud. They compose not necessarily most of the students, because we also have like your sociology, IR, politics, social anthropology, And not all of these folks, right, want to go into finance or consulting or even corporate at all, right? Journalism, international organizations. But the people who want to go into finance and consulting are involved in lots of different projects, initiatives on LinkedIn, and so on and so forth, which means that you just hear about that a lot more, and that
True.
defines the culture. But I think it's definitely there. It's hard to deny that that is like a common theme if there's something that links LSE students. And I think the reason for that is because LSE's brand signals well for employers in that space. So it's like a virtuous cycle, meaning most people see that as the low risk, linear approach for maximal career safety and a path towards, like, I suppose, eventual financial independence. So
Mm,
I think it makes sense, and that's definitely still a culture. But what I think for our entrepreneur society is we're not necessarily trying to challenge that, but a lot of these folks also are interested in building a side hustle or a venture on the as a aspiration or something they would prefer to do if it works out as well. So we really try to cater for all these different groups and audiences, regardless of what stage they're at in terms of like ideation or if they're already building out a prototype and or even fundraising.
mm. And that's awesome. It feels like there's so many crossover skills from all of your different roles, right? Whether you're curating for the WF or you're doing Entrepreneur Society or micro meetups,
Mm.
everything's focused on community, right? So which of those came first? And I guess how did you take learnings from one and apply them to the other?
Yeah, that's a really great one. I think definitely, yeah, it's like similar skill sets with slight tweaks across all of them. But I think where my story started was even earlier on before I arrived in London. So the backstory was, yeah, I was born and raised in Hong Kong, uh, lived there for like 19 years. But in 2019, I founded a nonprofit organization in Hong Kong after doing a summer internship at a mental health charity. And my realization at that point was I was quite academic, but I realized that I had so much more to gain from just on the job, like project based learning, actually doing something. And that was a bit of a gap in Hong Kong. It was a very academically oriented environment. There was no real like project based peer to peer learning space. So launched that, ran that for 3 years, and scaled that to 300 volunteers across 80 schools, launching 30 projects. So even at that point, it was around community building. It was around these questions of how do you motivate 300 volunteers who are high school aged, who are not paid, for them to really contribute and take ownership. That was really the goal, was like for them to manage their own projects, to think of new projects. So that
Mm,
was something we were thinking about, but also early stage thinking, like for these organizations, like succession. Let's say, okay, I'm graduating, now I'm going to university. How do I continue to build a leadership team? How do I make it sustainable? How do I build the capacity? So even all these questions back when I was like 16, 17 are still questions I'm solving or trying to solve in the roles I'm working on now, because these are sort of like eternal problems, I suppose. But yeah, that was my early formative experience. The organization's still running. But then yeah, I arrived in London, and to be fair, all of them kind of happened at the same time, but probably, yeah, I started off with entrepreneurs, uh, got involved with the Global Shapers as part of WEF, and then also like halfway up throughout the year started this idea of Micromeetup because I realized all these problems with the communities that I run and the communities that I were in, and really trying to solve those problems.
mm. I really want to unpack both micro meetups and your role at Web, but I will just comment first. I definitely understand some of the struggles of community building, having attempted to do it for Collective EC prior to having a lot of the engagement I was looking for. So I was just jumping the gun in the sense that I was saying to all these people, like, right, I want this to be a space for X, Y, and Z, but I hadn't actually really made any sort of magnetizing or pull factors to get people into it first. And then, that quickly results in dead group chats. You really want to provide that value. And part of you kicking yourself because you know you should have done it differently, but you just got too excited or something like that. And similarly, I'm doing a role right now with a guy called Ash Phillips who set up Rebel Meetups. You may have heard of
Yeah,
them. He scaled it to so many cities, and then obviously COVID just dealt a knockout blow, right? And
yeah,
it shows that communities are simultaneously so strong and such great models, but at the same time super fragile and things can really
exactly.
go wrong. Maybe tell us a little bit about the WEF, especially maybe from like a roping in a bit of a political perspective as well, because I
Yeah.
feel like you and I, we're probably both spending some time in different political spheres, and I feel like the West, there's a variety of perceptions, right? Some people, they have a very doom and gloomy thing, but I want to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, 100%. I think really at its core, right, WEF is an organization that provides an area to convene, right? Whether that's through Davos or whether that's through all these initiatives like the Global Shapers, it is a place to bring people together. Obviously, WEF, with its it has its own agenda, but its agenda is quite simple. It's really around this idea of like public-private partnerships and how to really drive that forward. So I think of them as a facilitator, I think of them as a convener. But specifically within the sort of global shapers community, it's really around flipping a script and saying, young people aren't really the leaders of tomorrow, they're the leaders of today. They're already making so many changes. The sort of hierarchies of before are quite uh, flipped on its head. And we see this mess with like the 50 people or global shapers actually who get to go to Davos every year because exactly they really walk the walk in terms of youth participation. So I think that's really what the global shapers is about specifically. And therefore, yeah, global shapers are all about social impact, driving local based projects. So we have, for example, more than nearly now 600 city based chapters. So London, we actually have three, but there's some in New York, across Africa, Asia, et cetera, really diverse chapters and hubs that are really driving local based projects and impact.
I realized I saw your post today. You've recently, does it count as a promotion or?
Yeah, I'd say so. Promotion, yeah, because I was doing something similar before, but yeah, a bit of a boost.
Okay, so I guess could you maybe tell us a little bit what that role looks like, and also what getting that role in the first place looks like?
Yeah. So when I joined the Global Shapers, this was literally I was still in Hong Kong when I did the interview. It was great. Like the interview really prioritizes like your mission and vision. So it's less about your credentials, it's about like throughout your life, how have you really tried to drive impact, no matter how small. Uh, what value would you bring to the community in terms of like alignment, value alignment? So that was fun. Literally, when I arrived, I joined the Shapers, and then I stepped up for like a bunch of volunteer roles, like managing the social media account, stuff like that. And then when the elections came about, yeah, I got elected as the vice curator. And what's unique about our hub is we're relatively new, so it was only set up like a year and a half ago now, like 2 years ago. Uh, because London, we had an expansion basically of hubs. There was only initially one hub, and now there's three, just because the WEF realized that there was just basically too much talent, right, in
Mm.
London, highly concentrated, and there needed to be essentially more representation here. There's hubs across the UK as well. But yeah, throughout my term as vice curator, it was really similar role, I suppose, as I will be taking, but around community building, capacity building. So at a core, what even is Global Shapers Community Hub is like a group of around 30 under 30s. These are sometimes consultants, sustainability experts, some investment bankers, actually, artists, architects, uh, students, a bit of everything, working together, both firstly as a community to meet each other and tap into the global shapers community. So all these different city-based hubs, all of this great networking, but then more importantly, working on these local-based impact projects. So we launched a few, now we're running 5, including like a community fridge project, for example, including a directory project, which we're launching soon to connect university students interested in entrepreneurship to our network. We have a civic engagement project, so on and so forth. We have a sustainability consulting for SMEs project. So really just grounded things that give a much more tangible impact to like your local, in this case, London community. And yeah, most recently, like a month ago, stepped up to run for the curatorship. And that role, which I'll take on in July, is basically fundamentally, again, community building. So of these like 30-ish people, how do we bring them closer together? How do we have them contribute in the easiest way possible, mindful that a lot of these people have full-time jobs, and at the same time build out our capacity as an organization, like working towards like charity registration, all those like nitty-gritty things that just have to be done. It's definitely challenging. It's a unique community, right? Because all these people here have full-time jobs, but it's a fun challenge for sure.
That's really interesting, especially the sort of diversity of initiatives you've got going
Mm,
on. How does that play into, like you said, you have a bunch of different people from all sorts of different disciplines? Is there real room for collaboration because everyone's got strengths in
mm.
different areas, or how do you sort of divide up the workload?
Yeah, for sure. I think how it really works is like people come in with their expertise in areas, right? Like we have quite a few like sustainability consultants, et cetera, et cetera. And how that came about is when they first joined the Shapers community, we do like ideation session, like people bring about their own ideas, and then we see if there's like common links. So like if there's 3 to 4 people who are interested in, for example, reskilling for the future. So like future of work-based stuff. We'll put them together, they'll sort of combine ideas, they'll ideate, dive deeper into like the problem specification and then like come up with a good solution for it. Or let's say they're interested in like sustainability, so on and so forth. So it's we divide it by clusters, and generally it works quite well because everyone in the hub has really strong networks or really strong like track records in their space, so they're able to really mobilize their resources and their discipline to make things happen. And I think that's what's really impactful, even if it's like 4 to 5 people working on a project. So that's yeah, something that's super powerful.
Mm. I'm curious, you said a lot of them are early career professionals and obviously
Mm,
they're very busy, but as
yeah.
someone you're yet to graduate, right?
Mhm.
So what does your timetable look like? Have you mastered lots of discipline tactics, time
Mhm.
blocking to get all of this stuff done?
Yeah, I think my perception of time management generally is like I always say this, but it's like when people say they're busy, I'm often skeptical because when I think I'm busy, I look at how I spend my time, and I'd say I'd still see pockets where like 2 to 3 hours, right? I'd be scrolling on YouTube or doing something completely unproductive. So I think really at its core, it's about prioritization above
Mm,
all else. It's like if you have something that you really care about, you make time for it because I think no one is unless you're really mastered that regimen and have self-discipline to the degree where yeah, you're time boxing every single thing of your life. It's about priorities. And I think that's how I work as well. It's like for me, these projects are pretty high priority. So I spend more time on them. But yeah, I still have like time management strategies like time boxing, like doing like calls to just go through things like with a sprint, stuff like that, delegating, all of that, of course. But yeah, something I'm learning is also like how to say no and also like be even more ruthless in my like attempts at optimizing what I care about, what I prioritize. So I think that's something that was my New Year's resolution. But it's like, yeah, how to cut down on things that are not as important to me and really just prioritize like the top 3, 4 things I do. I think that's something that I'm working on. But yeah, I think it's about priorities really.
I think that's a really good point. Is learning to say no and
Yeah.
just being comfortable saying no as well. I
Mm,
feel like so many people I relate to this as well. It's when you see a gap or you see those unproductive things and you think I could
mm,
be doing more here, and then you try and push yourself to 100%, and you realize that I feel like a better operating standard is around 80 to 90% of your full capacity because
yeah.
you need a little bit of buffer to just make sure that when things crop up, you're not eating into other time and everything has its own breathing room and you're not letting one thing, make anything else suffer, right? And
Exactly.
whilst preparing for this TEDx talk, I've realized that through being at 100% all the time,
Mm,
it's a detriment to other areas of my
grueling,
life.
right? Exactly.
Yeah. But how about university work as well, in terms of like assignments and stuff? Is it really grueling at LSE?
Yeah. I wonder what it's like for you, but at least for something like IR, it's really essay based, right? And luckily for me, a lot of the way we're assessed is based on coursework. So you're really able to switch on and off depending on, again, your priorities, what else you're working on. So I think that's something that's great is, yeah, sometimes I could prioritize my academics, like when there's summatives due or something that like there's a particularly interesting topic. But when, work comes up for entrepreneurs, Micromeetup, shapers, like I'm able to also focus on that. So I think that's quite good because definitely people I hear from like economics, law, yeah, you can't really exactly just like say, okay, I'm just gonna take a step back. Like that is nearly like you have to be focusing on that all the time, just because there's so many checkpoints, uh,
Mm.
summatives, et cetera, every step of the way. So I think that's something great about IR is like it offers that flexibility. Not sure what it's like for you, but it
No,
gives me
I would
more
definitely
time
agree.
working on this.
100% agree when it comes to having essays. It's rigorous, but it's predictably rigorous in the sense that
Yeah.
you know when they're due. You know when you want to start building structures and plans and looking over your reading notes, etc., and really getting that stuff ready. I'm also curious because lots of people say university is the best time to start a startup, right? And that's exactly what you're doing. Usually make the idea that you've got loads of free time, but I'm curious how that works into your schedule with building Micromeetup as well.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think, firstly, yeah, definitely agree. Like, universities are generally, yeah, the best time to start a startup because, like, you're able to take that risk in the sense, cost of switching, and like the sunk costs if you're like midway through your career are just so high. You have so many more responsibilities. All of that makes a lot of sense. Secondly, people are much more willing to help out, like for free, whether that be like volunteers for your team, early team, or even mentors. And just generally, people are more willing to help out students than say someone who's like 25 and like ex McKinsey or something. So yes, I think that's definitely the case. But I think the caveat here is a few things is what I've seen, and I suppose this is answering your second point is it's the tricky balance of again time management because if you're a student wanting to build a venture, you're at the core a student, so you have your academic responsibilities. But say if you're involved in like societies and other things as well, and that's also something that's there. And then say if you're also looking still to venture into like conventional careers, corporates, and like normal jobs, you then need to be balancing all of those at like different scales and different levels. And that's definitely tricky. And I think the risk for that is like, yeah, you lose focus. So that's something I think I'm hopefully, yeah, trying to navigate through is making sure I'm focused and giving enough time for everything. But I think generally that's a drawback of being a student entrepreneur is like at the same time, you really need to think about whether you're ready to go all in and what's the best timing for that.
Mm.
Because if you're looking to raise, VCs generally don't like the fact that you're also still a student. You're going to need to take an interruption year. You're going to need to take a gap year, drop out. At the same time, if you're starting in your first year, second year, you're also missing out on the very linear cycles of recruiting for corporate careers. And those become progressively harder to break into as you move along like your university journey. So it's all about these trade-offs and like what's the best fit for you. But yeah, that's tricky. But I think for me, my logic for building a startup is that's the thing I want to do, I suppose, for the rest of my life, or that's something I think is the most aspirational thing one can do. But I think my thinking is that I'm still realistic, that I'm still a student. I have other commitments that I think are also really impactful, and therefore I'm not ready to go at this point like completely all in. That might change very soon, but I think yeah, everyone has to assess how much time they're willing to put in and how to balance that with the other projects or things that they're working on. And that's yeah, one of the unfortunate things about being a student
Mm.
entrepreneur.
And it's just keeping doors open, right? It's like
Yeah,
just because you can't go 100% in, and because people say, "Oh, you shouldn't have a plan B. You should 100% focus on one thing." It's like, well, that is just isn't the reality for so many
yeah,
people, and that just isn't what day-to-day life looks like. So obviously, there's no shame in not being 100% involved in
mhm.
something, and it's admirable that you started a startup while studying as well. So maybe could you just talk a little bit about what your vision is for Micro Meetup?
Yeah. So really the big vision is again reducing the barriers for connecting in the real world. So what does that actually mean? It's to be like, let's say when you walk into a WeWork, for example, you're a member there, or you walk into any like university campus environment. The right now the problem is, let's say you walk there could be at least like 20 people out of the let's say 50 people in that space who could be relevant to you. Maybe they work in the same industry, maybe who knows, they went to the same high school even. There's so many of these connection points. But unless you're the type of person who would like literally walk up to everyone and introduce yourself, you wouldn't know and you wouldn't get that sort of connection basically. So the ultimate vision is when you walk into that WeWork, you're able to get a push notification on your phone that says, hey, there's free people here. that are relevant to you. You're free in the next hour. Why don't you meet up in this, like, for example, co-working spot here to talk about, and then a list of topics. So it's being, when wherever you go, be able to fully maximize network effects and the potential that's there. So that's the really ultimate goal, is for these communities, targeted, curated communities, whether that's universities, whether that's corporates, whether that's, big events and conferences with 20,000 people, you're able to meet in real life effortlessly. And what we're doing is therefore building an AI-enabled agent that creates an excuse for you to reach out and to connect in real life.
I like that, an excuse to reach out. Oftentimes it's an excuse to, stay in or be introverted or study. So I like that. I like that, the flip on that narrative. Does it synchronize with calendars, right? So if you are a busy person, can you just, will it let you know you're busy now? It's like, there is no excuse.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the goal, is like it's connected to your calendar. I think when we built our prototype, it was like people had to manually schedule, manually host. And the pain point we saw there was, people weren't too big of fans of hosting because, that's a high social cost and, it's high friction. People wanted like really creative and purposeful things. And so really what we're working towards is, making it as frictionless as possible. So embedding it to your calendar so it knows when you're free, when you're not free. So these nudges, these notifications actually make sense to you. Yeah, that's 100% the plan.
I like that. And I really like nudges that aren't abrasive and they're actually, you're excited to get them. I mean, the last time I've received a notification that hasn't annoyed me, it's that I feel like it's really tricky to make that sort of user experience good. So honestly, good luck with it, and I'll definitely be getting the app myself. But I'm curious also, what distinguishes a meetup as micro, right? Because how do you not just become another events platform where people start advertising their other events on there?
Yeah, 100%. So when we first launched as our prototype, it was quite flexible. Like people, if you think of it, the prototype I built with no code was like an Eventbrite clone, but then stripped out all the unnecessary things. So it was like as basic as possible. But our initial focus was on micro events. So what we call small, spontaneous, surprising gatherings of 3 to 5 people. And the initial concept was, say, if you wanted to, try out a new restaurant, go to a museum, play a new sport, you're free in the next hour, you can create the event page quite seamlessly and sort of invite people or just put it on the platform. And so what we think, why that's quite unique, is like, firstly, I've been to so many big events where there's like a 50% churn rate, people don't show up. What we see with small scale events is, number one, because it's so spontaneous, because the lead time is like what, an hour or 2 hours, the chances of them changing their mind are much lower. The reason I think people drop out of big events like week or two before they show up is because like there's just too much anticipation. So that's one friction point, is people don't like, things that they aren't able to, they're really bad at predicting their plans and how it changes in a week or two. So one aspect, spontaneity. The number two aspect is around uh the value of having like small scale meetups in general, because when you're at a very big event, two problems, like maybe you're only able to connect with like 4 to 5 people in this like big room of 50, not great. Or alternatively, you're at a dinner party, you're only able to really talk to like the 2 people right next to you. That's really a sticking point for me. So I think the logic here is 3 to 5 people is sort of a sweet spot where you're able to really get to know these people at a slightly deeper level than, say, your average networking event or big society event. And therefore, it's a great excuse in the future to reach out. You have, again, that excuse, that trigger. And I think that's the goal. But we're still, for the final product, letting people like host slightly larger events. But I think it's like, that's not the value add, right? Like there's other platforms that do that better if you're trying to run a party like Partiful. But for what we're trying to do, which is like, as opposed to creating new forms of like event discovery or creating events out of scratch, then that's, I suppose, a slightly different positioning.
I totally agree with the first point you made, which is that people are very bad at predicting how their plans change. And I think that spontaneity is a really, really nice addition, because there's so many things I've wanted to do. And then you have to RSVP as well. So you say yes, and then you think, you don't know what's going to pop up that is more important than that. We all assign different values to different events, but you don't want to feel like you've let an event organizer down because you've suddenly switched up. So I think, being able to look 1 or 2 hours, 1 or maybe 3 hours into the future and thinking, that's a gap where I'd be happy to meet someone and do something. Today's the day. There's no reason not to. I really like that idea. And also what you said about dinner meetups is so true. I remember a startup I was working for paid for me to go to the Green Tech Festival in London. And I was just this like fresh-faced, naive 19-year-old student. And I get sat down at dinner with like these career professionals, and not only do I feel bad because I can't like move around and talk to people and try and, add value to different conversations here and there and learn, but you're literally, because you're stuck in one place, that conversation dries off so fast, especially if you're somebody who's trying to break into a scene, and you have to rely on these sort of new ideas and bouncing between people to people. And so, yeah, I definitely see what you're doing here. So, yeah, in terms of building a team for Micromeetup, you say we, so I assume you're not doing it alone.
Yeah, so it's a great funny journey actually. So when we built like prototype one, yeah, we had a great team of around like 15 volunteers. And what's great is actually our core team, so it was like 5, 6 people, they all came from like completely inbound basically. So I shared what I was building very early on LinkedIn. I just added it to my profile. And yeah, people just reached out and were like, hey, I have this problem myself. Would love to just help out in any way. So I think I did some pretty good conventional startup testing where it's like I like talked to them about the ideas, but also like trial worked a bit with them, like gave them mini tasks and that sort of thing. And yeah, brought them on board. And then we expanded with like a bit of a larger team and ambassadors as well. So that was like pre prototype building out this first version. And yeah, that was really, really great, quite productive. And yeah, now we're turning a new leaf because we want to build this sort of AI agent and enabled feature. So now the focus is looking towards like a technical team. The previous team was much more growth, like testing user fit, all of that. But now it's like working towards that real AI MVP. That's going to require more technical team. So yeah, keeping some of them on, bringing on new folks as well. But I think yeah, one of the luxuries is being a student entrepreneur is you can work with other students, and it makes a lot more sense. Whereas yeah, if you're like full time, people will definitely want, if not equity, then full time pay. That's what a lot of like VC money goes to too, unfortunately. But that makes sense, right? But as a student, you have the luxury where you're not getting paid, no one's getting paid, and you're really doing it out of passion at that very, very early stage, very low risk, besides opportunity costs and your time when you're building something in uni.
And so I guess that's a real testament to building in public and talking openly about what you're doing. I kind of don't know where to sit on this because I know it's sort of a bit narcissistic to assume that the idea you have is the best idea ever and that you don't want to tell anyone about it. But at the same time, it's very human, right? And sharing these things can be daunting. But you had a good experience with talking openly and getting people coming to you excited to work with you rather than just, scraping what you're doing.
Yeah, I think it's a cultural thing too, because I know like it's quite interesting. I know highly technical folks would generally be the other end, right? It's like, they'd want to really just focus on building the best possible thing and the people will come. And maybe because I'm less technical, it's really a lot of the times also around how you brand and communicate your idea and then convince people to work with you, I suppose. But yeah, I think I remember sharing one of those frameworks, right? But it's like that lovely matrix of how great your product or how good it is what you do versus how good you are communicating it. And again, the best case scenario is obviously your best of both. But in most cases, you're able, even optimizing for one over the other, you're able to land in a pretty good spot. But I think, yeah, it's all about increasing your surface area of luck. The more you talk about something, the more people who may be able to help out, maybe able to offer support, offer a challenge to you, be able to join a team, blah, blah, blah. This all is a result of being quite loud and noisy about what you're working on. So yeah, there's pros and cons, I think. And you should obviously do it to only like a certain degree and not like toot your horn too much. But it's a way to really drive opportunities and inbound leads basically for to accelerate your project, accelerate your venture.
Thank you for sending me the surface area of luck before, by the way, because I've sent it to quite a few people now and I really, really resonate with it. It's just really good at pointing out areas for self-introspection as well, and just thinking it's very tempting to talk a lot and say I'm doing this, and even talk about things you are going to be doing and haven't done yet. And I think also being hesitant to talk about stuff that might be coming is a really good strategy, because it means you don't build this level of anticipation where people think you're greater than you are. I see founders doing it sometimes on LinkedIn, talking about upcoming product releases or talking about we're gonna raise this, we're planning this, and it's like, rather than trying to generate this hype, which can fall through, and then it kind of looks worse. I don't know why they don't just sort of internalize some of that and use it as this fuel to think this will look good when I announce it properly in X amount of time.
Yeah, I think it's a fine balance. It's like either you just have so much confidence in yourself. But I think it's also the way you make these statements as well. It's like I think you can you can start from a point of humility too. It's like, hey, I'm building this, would love help, or like would love any ideas, rather than making it like some grand pre-press release type of thing. I think that generally helps. But I think there's also saw a recent post where it's like some guy just applied to YC, right? Didn't get an interview, literally just applied, posted a screenshot of that on like Twitter, and like got leads from like other tier one VCs. Like you just applied, right? Nothing happened, you just applied. But everyone, like they got like people on their wait lists. They got people just like coming in droves. So it's like, even something that's so, again, a non-achieve. It's achievement, I suppose you submitted it, but not really something substantial is able to just drive hype. So I think, there's pros and cons to that. I think there's ways from a comms perspective to be able to like tailor it so you don't sound so like problematic. But it's pros and cons.
That's interesting. That's what VCs mean when they say they've got like curated deal flow. They're really just looking through Twitter for the for the meme post. That's interesting. What do you think about Twitter as a tool for personal branding as well? Because I haven't really got onto it, but or X now, sorry. But I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I definitely need to do more on that. Like I'm generally just like a passive consumer, but I think there's a big potential. And again, it's a cultural difference. I think folks in the US, like startup venture ecosystem, are much more active maybe on X. I think if if you prefer like short form content, or you just sort of are able to force yourself to randomly like just contribute ideas and really engage in this like quick style of stuff, then I think that's great. And I know a lot of folks are able to get like really good deal flow, but also just like meet interesting people off X, off Twitter. I think LinkedIn does like general purpose probably better, because you're able to better capture like what you've done before. There's a broader range of professionals on there as well. So I think, best world is you're on both. I know some people who are completely inactive on LinkedIn, vice versa. I think my platform is still LinkedIn, but I think there's Twitter X is good if you're particularly in a startup VC ecosystem, or if you want to engage with the US and you have something to say. I think that's the core of it, is like you need to be able to just have enough ideas, or not have a filter, right? Like you need to just be able to treat it as if you're speaking to a friend, and you're able to really whip out quick ideas. So it's not for everyone, because you really need to be quite agile with it to make it work for you.
That's good insight. And I think also with LinkedIn is about honesty, because some people say that you should only have your most recent things on there. If you're going for a job, you should really tailor it to that specific job. It's like, I like the idea that it's a digital sort of footprint almost of everything I've done and everything I've been up to. And I will list, the very first job I ever had, which is some retail job. Like, if you want to look back and see what I've been doing, and maybe one day when I'm, in the place I want to be, I can look back and see my own progression. And I like that about LinkedIn, the sort of chronological progression. And it feels like Twitter is much more about sort of being charismatic and having the quick jokes and posting frequently about all these sort of insightful topics. So, it's a good comparison to me. Maybe penultimate question. Knowing everything you do now and the worldview you have and all the things you are doing, if you could give a message to yourself of 10 years time, and maybe from an accountability perspective of where you'd like to be, what would you say to yourself?
In 10 years time, I would say like, hopefully I'm much more focused. I think I'm at the stage where, because I'm working on so many different things, like it's much more of a portfolio, and really testing fit and testing where I work best. But hopefully by that point, I would have some degree of focus. I still think there's so much value to having many different projects, be working in this sort of portfolio career mode. But I think I want to have something at that point where I'm just completely assessed about where it has my undivided attention. So I think it's definitely one thing is by that point, I hope I'm focused. And I think by that point also, it's being more relaxed, I suppose, being more open to sort of uncertainty and like even risk, and just in general, like chilling out, I'd say. Like in 10 years, like focus and chilling out, which is somewhat contradictory, but I think it's like two states that I really want to just like have more in my life, basically.
I like that. Another question is, if you had all of the money in the world tomorrow and you had to develop an pretty specific investment thesis, what would that thesis be?
A really great question. I think if I had all the money in the world, I think my thesis is like, what would be able to drive mindset change? I think the reason a lot of startups fail, especially in like consumer and especially like social, for example, is because they aren't able to change people's minds. So, for example, with Micromeetup, with our initial prototype, like what I thought was, like, with this hosting aspect, we could convince people to host, we could drive education, we can do all of that. And technically it's possible, but the challenge of getting people to change their mind is something that's like longer time horizon or require like a lot of investment. It's like not something I think we could really growth hack in a really short period of time. Maybe with like right incentives, but challenging. So I think my investment thesis would be like ideas that use tech to that are able to move the needle in the way people think. So the way people connect in real life, for example, the way people think about sustainability, the way like I think one of the biggest barriers now to sustainability is like, are people willing to pay higher prices, for example? Are people willing to shift how they interact with a lot of things? So I think that's where if I had unlimited money or as much money as possible, like I think those are the ideas that would be game changing because then they set the ground for other non-mindset shifting ideas to work to be able to scale and grow because now people are in a new place, a new paradigm. So I think that's where I'd look to.
That's awesome. I lied. It's not the final question, just because I wanted to bounce off that point a little bit. Do you think that would come down to how we consume in terms of information? Because I think short form content is the ultimate brain rot of our generation. I really have a problem with it. And I've noticed some apps cropping up that are like, for example, I think one's called Zeed, and it's like financial information at your fingertips rather than just a stream of useless stuff. Maybe there's an element for that, maybe with Water Bear or another sustainability network, to get into like content that's more short form, but also, like you say, shifts people's mentalities towards more positive things.
Yeah, I think so. Although it's like again, it requires significant like resources like coordination, like multiple stakeholders, just because it's one of those things where it's like suppose short form content like plays to people's like short attention spans, like it's exploitative in that sense, right? It's like now you have those YouTube shorts where it's like the meme, I suppose, like everything you see has to have that like video gameplay, like I don't know, like some training gameplay. Like I think that's gonna be hard to reverse, but I think yes, I think there's a lot of potential to like slow down or to have like more curated ways for people to consume content. I'm still a big fan of like in real life curation as well. So still getting people to meet up in person, exchange ideas. So I still run like curated dinners on the side where it's like it's facilitated. So you have like targeted questions to really try to dive like deeper connections. And yeah, even with like I think with all the metaverse, like people will still have a space to meeting in real life, being there, being present, and learning through that way as well.
I like that. I'd like an invite to one of those curated dinners. Sounds brilliant.
Yeah,
With
100%.
the questions I did. I think Stephen Butler did something similar with the sort of conversation starter pack. I feel like a lot of times young people especially just default to talking about stuff that isn't as deep. It's good. It's great. It's great when those icebreakers really push you out of your comfort zone. So yeah, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for coming on, sharing your thoughts, spending the time to do so. And yeah, thank you very much, Reese.
All right, appreciate it.